So today is a bit of fingerstyle again, after many weeks of jamming and theory stuff, and circle of fifths last week, which I did particularly enjoy actually, and I know quite a lot of you seem to enjoy, which was fantastic. And obviously, if you weren't there for that as well, you can go back and watch it. But yeah, today is more of a fingerstyle thing. And we've got a really nice little groove. Hey, Carl. Welcome, welcome. Which can get up to sort of quite complex and advanced level, but equally it can work really well as a kind of a beginner, almost edging into intermediate realm as well, I'd say. So let me just share the music with you, the notation with you first, so you can get a little sight of what's going on. Now, there's sort of 3 levels that I've got written out for you already. Okay, and we start up here. All right, so don't get too overwhelmed by loads and loads of lines. Okay, we've got a nice little cycle going from an A5 to a G sus2 to an F sharp minor 6, I'm calling that. Okay, and then we've got this little percussive engine, if you like, or machine that goes on all the time in the background. And then we've got some really interesting little techniques thrown in. We've got some strums with string slaps simultaneously, which will be nice and fun. And eventually we'll work up to bringing in some melody into it as well. But currently, the beginning parts of it is going to sound something like this. Okay, and then we'll build up to something that will sound a little bit more like this.
Your sound's gone, Chris.
Oh, has it? Oh, thanks, buddy. How long ago had it gone?
Just when you were starting to do the playing on that last bit, started to disappear then.
It hasn't actually gone. It's your it's Zoom muting it because it's hearing the clicks, I think, or your microphone. It's that. The sound was working. It was just switching off the slaps.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just gonna have a little quick tweak. Let's give this a go. Does that still cut it out? We're good. Excellent. Wow, there we go. Thank you, though. I really appreciate that, because otherwise I'll just carry on and it will sound awful. Great. Okay, so we've got the more beginner-esque way of looking at this little riff. Okay, and then we are going to move up to something a little bit more open like this. Okay, and then we're going to build up to putting some melody in. That kind of stuff as well. Okay, so we're going to hopefully have something for absolutely everyone. So what we're going to look at first is just these 2 bars here. All right, we're not actually going to worry about these chords right now. We're just going to look at these 2 bars here, which all utilizes 1 chord. Now, how we play that chord, I think, is pretty crucial. And what we're going to do is we're going to bar with the first finger on the 2nd fret. Okay, however, the bar is slightly different, where we just want the pressure, or let me rephrase that. We want the majority of the pressure to be on the D and the G string, okay, with the first finger. So B, for example, or E are completely muted, all right? So you've got a nice lazy finger towards the end of the guitar, but you're really squeezing against the strings on the D and the G, okay? That's just going to help you out loads if you can play it like that. If it's a real problem, then you can go back to using it with 2 fingers if you like, but it's going to really help you if you could try and have that sort of half bar. So it's kind of easy to bar things when, I don't know, with an F chord, for example, where you're only doing a couple of strings, but with this, it's a little harder because obviously you've got strings that are muted, all right? So it's just a sort of paying attention to pushing the pressure on the D and G and lifting your finger up just enough to mute the other strings. Okay? So what's going to happen then is we're going to play our little pattern on this first bar. Now, once we've learned this, all right, everything is sort of based on this. So we're going to go super, 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 super slow, all right, because if we miss something at this point, then it becomes a little bit of a problem. So holding this A5 chord, we're going to use our thumb to play the A string. Nice and simple. Everyone should be pretty comfortable with that. Holding the chord, play that with the thumb. Now what happens now, and this is on beat 2, okay? So if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, you go 1, 2. And on 2, what we're going to do is we're going to strum the strings, but with our fingers, okay? Probably fingers 1 and 2, but there's no exact science to this, all right? You can maybe use all your fingers, but you're going to flick those fingers out, all right? So down with the thumb for the A, and then flick fingers out. Now in the tab, if that's what you're looking at, you're going to see lots of X's up here. You're not going to see the A written out again. You're going to see a little X here that I'm going to talk about in a second. Now don't get too hung up on that, all right? Basically hold the chord as best you can and flick your fingers out. So you've got the A and then the strum. 1, 2, all right? Okay, so visualize that in the whole thing. Okay, now the next thing that we want to do is just be able to control how long that strum rings out for. Now, technically speaking, I should write these notes slightly differently so you can see them ring out for so short, but it just becomes a little bit messy and inaccessible. So what we want to do is just let these fingers come down and stop the strings vibrating. So play the bass note, flick the fingers out, and then use your other fingers, 2, 3, and 4, or one of them, whatever, just to touch the strings and stop it ringing out. Okay, boom. Alright, so really spend your time getting that. Try not to cut any corners, and if you're a super uber guitar playing genius already, then I'd suggest just really honing the control there, alright? Rather than getting frustrated with how slow we're going. Okay? Now, if you are said super uber genius level of guitarist, or perhaps slightly below that, I would suggest you look at this little X down here, okay? That is supposed to be a string slap at the same time, which is a really interesting little technique. I think this has cropped up in something briefly before, but what happens is we flick our fingers out like we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, but at the same time we turn our wrist a little bit so that the side of the thumb clicks against the strings. Now actually it kind of comes as one whole motion, because if you like, if you squeeze your fingers and thumb together and then push all of them out, your thumb naturally comes back a bit. So that emphasis of the wrist is not quite so much there as we would usually for a string slap. Okay, we could just find that we push our fingers out and thumb at the same time. Now, if you're a beginner guitarist, I wouldn't, give it a go if you like, but that's a pretty tricky technique to get, okay? Okay. So we've got two options of playing it. We've got playing the bass note and the strum and then stopping it from ringing out. Or we've got the sort of more advanced version where we do a string slap at the same time. Okay. Then what happens is we're going to leave our fingers over the strings here and we're going to play a particular pattern. Now, usually we talk about index, middle and ring playing strings G, B and E. But for today, they're going to be playing D, G and B. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to play the A string with your thumb. Now remember, your fingers are muting it, so it should sound like this. And then index and middle are going to play up on D and G. Okay, and that is on 3 and. So we've had 1 and, no, sorry, 1, 2, 3 and. Okay, 1, 2, 3 and. All right. And then after that, we do a string slap by turning our wrist, and then we play up with our index and middle finger on the D and G string. Okay. So. I'm going to take the tab away just for a little second, I think. So that can be particularly tricky if you're new to finger picking, for example. But what we want to do is, rather than necessarily try and do the whole thing all at once, it's just a case of trying to maybe do those first few notes. So throughout the session, just take those first few notes and play them, and then let me fill in the rest of the space, and you can work on the rest a bit later. A really great sort of amount of notes is actually those first two, really, where you're playing bass, strum. Okay, so if for the rest of the session you're just working on doing that, that'll really pay dividends in the long run, all right? Great. Okay, so back to learning it note for note. So we've mastered this first little bar here, which is actually going to make our second bar sound or be a little bit easier. And that's because we have this constant motion of on, off, or number and. Okay, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and what's happening is we're going thumb and fingers. So we're doing this down and up repetition, all right? Now, you'll notice, if you look at the tab, that the thumb sometimes is on the A string and sometimes it's on the E string. When it's on the E string, it's got a little S above it, which means a string slap, okay? So we're playing with the thumb here, but we're slapping the strings here. And here, we're playing up on the D and G with our fingers. So we end up doing, just looking at that second bar, we're going thumb, up, thumb, up. Okay? I'm going to do that a whole bunch of times. So thumb, up, slap, up, thumb, up, slap, up. Thumb, up, slap, up, thumb, up, slap, up. Put all together for the bars 1 and 2. Surprisingly tricky. As I said, build up sort of incrementally. I think that's a word that's right. If not, it sounded good anyway. And start with just the first 2 notes. Okay? And then gradually build up from there. Go for it, Lucy.
Just a quick question with the slaps on, obviously on here it's relating to the lower E string. Is that sort of normal that most slaps are just for that string, or can it be specified with others?
Yeah, totally. So it can be anywhere essentially, because you're just trying to make a percussive sound. But it just seems that the lower the string, the sort of easier it is to get a bit of a click. But if you're getting a click from the A or the D, that's totally fine as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No, pleasure. Good, excellent question. Cool. So I'm just going to play that through a few times because, as I said, we're sort of getting the engine of what's going on here. So I really want to make sure everything's covered, and then we'll accelerate a bit. However, we are definitely doing something quite tricky here, technical-wise anyway. So here we go around again. Just those first 2 bars that we're looking at should sound something, when played very slowly, like this. So as you get a little bit more comfortable with it, try and swing it a little bit, okay? Rather than necessarily speeding up first, just try and loosen up a bit. Great. And then start to focus in on the sort of mechanism of the motion, all right? Where we're really going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And if you can start to get in the habit of sort of almost flicking your fingers out a little bit on the downs, that's actually going to help slightly as we get a little bit further in. So really just focusing on the sort of flow of the movement. Fantastic. Great. Okay. So let's now look at the rest of what's going on here. So after this, we just move in to a nice little sequence of going down to a G sus2 and an F sharp minor 6. And we do exactly the same thing, but there's obviously a couple of little very minor changes where our thumb, for example, now starts playing the bass note on the E string. Okay, but first of all, let's learn how to play these chords. So moving from the A5 is quite easy because we're going to take our first finger and now just fret the 2nd fret on the G. So we're going to have an open D and 2nd fret G. There I just played that with index and middle, all right? Those fingers are going to be glued around there. And then I would suggest just using your 2nd finger, 3rd fret E string. Okay, and then the 3rd chord is F sharp minor 6. It's a bit of a weird one here really, but actually going down with your 2nd finger again can be kind of nice to cover the 2nd fret on the E string. Okay, or you could switch around like this, it's up to you. It really is. Alright, it's a really nice little chord sequence as well. Right, and then the pattern just works through in the same way as it did for those first 2 bars. Then G, and then to F sharp, and then back to the beginning again. Okay, we're aiming to work up to a sort of it's easier then to actually get this little shuffly feel. Okay, so it's surprisingly easy to get to that point. All right, if you're still really struggling, as I said, just try and get that first bass chord, bass chord, and then same for the next chord, bass chord, bass chord. All right, and we're going to do some improvising later as well. So if fingerstyle isn't your thing, you can get stuck in. All right, I'm just going to play this round in loop for a little bit of time, relatively slowly, and give you an opportunity to see what's going on and see if you can join in as best as possible. I think that sort of... I think that kind of pace should be relatively all right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we play that A twice. Sorry. Cool. Okay, let's move on down here to the very bottom and give you guys something to do if you're not really into your fingerstyle, okay? Just to give us something to jam over the top. So here is a little scalic idea, all right? It's kind of an A mixolydian, but we're not going to get hung up on theory stuff right now. It's just a nice little pattern to learn. There's just lots of little open phrases that can come from it, surprisingly easy. So it's kind of nice to learn in the way that it's written. So I'll talk you through that. What I would suggest starting with is your third finger so you can get into sliding. So you have an open A and then play 2 and then slide up to 4. Okay, and then on the D I'll do the same. And then I would do the same on the G, then sliding up to the 6, and then here I would swap to your first finger on the 5 on the B, and then up to the 7 on the B, and then first finger on the 5 on the E. Okay? Now there's a million and one beautiful phrases to be found in here. For example, just looking at the first 3 notes, okay, that already sounds like a gorgeous phrase. And you can skip the open D and play just the 2nd fret on the D string there with your first finger. There's a million and one little melodies in there already. Alright. And then equally we could do little jumps to each to the next string by skipping between strings. For example, going 4 on the A, 2 on the D, and then pulling off to an open D, and then doing the same thing on D and G, and then finishing on 4 on the G. There's just lots of opportunities for you there. Okay, I would suggest, again, if you're more of a beginner guitarist, just take a few of those notes, maybe even the first 3. And then as we play through this riff, which we're going to speed things up a little bit now, just try and improvise around with some melodies over the top. And it should sound rather lovely. Alrighty, I'm going to go back up now to what was written at the top. So feel free to screenshot at any point. Excellent. We'll play around this a few times and then we will start to open it up a bit, I think. Great. Here we go then. So we're going to speed it up a little bit as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, my mistake. Lovely, great. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding in some really lovely sounding things that don't actually require us doing anything else. All that we're adding in is, rather than muting on these little offbeats, we're actually letting things ring out. So we end up with this. Okay, again, sort of moving into more advanced realms. But let me explain a little bit more. That first bar is exactly the same, okay? However, the second bar here is exactly the same motion, but rather than it being X's, where we're muting, we're actually squeezing the chord. Okay, so we get, and all that requires is just that you put the pressure down of that chord to come out again. All right, at this point, I expect it might be out of the reach of beginner and sort of early intermediate players. All right, so don't panic. You can still be enjoying that as you will, and improvising over the top and such like as well. All right, but doing this is going to sort of bring it to life a little bit more. So, for example, just doing those first two bars again, like we did at the beginning, it would now sound. It really brings it to life, doesn't it? Now, when you first try that, it probably won't be quite as fluid. One of the reasons it sounds quite nice is they're not actually evenly measured. Okay, so for that last one, for example, I hold down for much longer, so we get this. Played a bit slowly. All right, if you've ever listened to some ZZ Top, you'll be able to hear the kind of vibe that's going on here, really. And interestingly, some of you who might read notation and stuff be thinking, why haven't you written this exactly in the notation? It's because the differences between each note and the control of how long they ring out are just sort of mathematical impossibilities, if you like. They're too detailed to really put in. So if you read them as playing on offbeats and then just feel how long you're going to squeeze for, right? Because we don't want to be thinking into hemi-demi semi-quavers or whatever. Great. Okay, we can do exactly the same thing with all the other chords as well. So we can end up with. start to sound really lovely. Cool, we're going to play around that. And if you're a beginner guitarist, maybe you just want to give those chords at the beginning. Or maybe you want to do all the percussive stuff. Or maybe you want to do the bit that we just learned when we're bringing in the chords. Or maybe you want to use that scale. Maybe you want to use that scale to improvise and noodle around with. Cool, we'll get going then. And I'll leave that up for a little second. In fact, I tell you what, because I get a bit bored of looking at a screen of tab and I can only see a few of you. If you would like to have that in front of you, if I could just ask you to sort of screenshot it now, that'd be quite helpful. Otherwise, I shall take it away. Cool. There we go. All right. Great. Okay, here we go. We're just going to play around that a few times. Over to you guys. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. Okay, really great to see so many people playing along with that in some way. It is, I think I can see some people as well just keeping the rhythm of almost like a down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And that is a wonderful way to get into that, because even if you just spend 20 to 30 minutes playing along with that sort of mechanism or movement, that's going to open up a lot of possibilities in your fingerstyle playing of just going thumb, up, slap, up. And you you can apply that to a million different chords. Okay, it's a lovely sort of motion and mechanism to get comfortable with and playing. Cool, okay, let's bring in some melody. Okay, we'll start sort of as simplistic as possible, and then we're going to bring in a little bit more advanced again. All right. So the first little bit of melody we've got is just fitting in exactly with the motion that we were doing with finger picking. So those first two bars that we were just doing, okay, we're going to now do exactly the same thing, but just change our left hand slightly to have this. All right, I'll show you that in notation or tab, so that can be quite helpful. Okay, here we are now. We're looking at these two bars here. All right, so this first bar is exactly the same. We can be nice and confident with that. And then our third finger is going to play the 4th fret on the D, okay, which would have been with a movement with our thumb anyway. And then our first finger is going to fret on the 2nd fret on the G, and we're going to play that with our index finger as an up. So that motion is still the same, down, up on that second bar. Okay, before you were going down, up, but now you're going down, right? It's the same motion. Tiny little motor difference of now you're playing the D and the G string, but what's really important is the sort of the gross motor movement is the same, all right? So you're just sort of in the flow there. Okay, so down with the thumb, up with the index finger. Then we have a string slap, and then we play up with our index finger on 6th fret on the G. Okay, and then we have a muted down with our thumb. And how we do that, that's going to be kind of interesting, all right? Maybe you just want to use some other fingers, all right, to mute those strings. I'm using 2nd finger really. And then we play up on 4, and then we string slap, and we're up on 2. The crucial thing is to relate it back to how it was before. So it was, oh no, sorry. It was even dum tap, dum tap, dum tap, dum tap. So now it's exactly the same motion, just on different strings, and the left hand's doing different things. So dum tap, 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 dum tap, 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 or dum tap, tap, tap. Okay, so originally it was this. Then we started to add the chord in. And now we've changed the left hand a bit. Alright, I might be sort of oversimplifying it in its explanation there a little bit, because it is pretty darn tricky. But the principle is there of just down and up, just all down and up. When I say it's just down and up, I'm not trying to say it's just down and up, it's really easy. I'm just trying to say that actually if you're struggling with it, sort of take a step back and just think, it's just down and up, it's just down and up. That's all I've got to get. Down, up, 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 down, up. So down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, I'm intrigued if anyone can actually play that yet, because it's. I'm going to look at some facial expressions to see. I feel maybe a Lucy and an Andy could maybe play the melody there. Maybe. Maybe. I think so. Okay, and Anil, yeah, go for it, mate.
I just want to ask a question. How do you mute the A string on the? Because you know, you've got the two slaps. I can see that, but
Yeah.
on that,
So-
how do you do that?
I think I'm using my second finger, but ultimately any finger spare really. It's actually kind of, if you can even use your little finger and just playing melodies on the G string, and playing that same mechanism of down note, slap note, you know, can be a kind of. It's just that mechanism all the time. Yeah, I think I'm using my second finger in the very long answer to that, Neil. Fab. Okay, now I haven't actually written a melody for the next bunch of chords because I felt like I was hoping this was going to be sort of testing enough, and I think it might be. There are plenty options that we can do as little melodies. Of course, that little scale that is written out for you is full of them. A favourite of mine is this, which I'll very briefly show you because it sounds impressive. Alright, all it is running in sort of sets of two, but you're not playing two notes as such, but they're sets of two with your first and third finger, okay? And I start off with my first finger on the 4th fret on the G, and I hammer on to the 6th fret with my third finger on the G. I pull off, and then pull off to open. No, I don't. I sort of slide down to 2 in that case, sorry. So 4, 6, 2, slide. Okay? And then I play hammer on to 4, 2, open. Okay? Lovely. All right, and then we finish by just doing 2, 4, 2, O on the D, and 2, 4, 2, O on the A. Sorry, down. All right. Cool. Well, that was a slight digression anyway, and a little bit of fun. Lovely. Okay, cool. So we've taken it a long way, really. There's a lot of notation there, isn't there? Or a lot of tab even. Now, you guys are obviously going to have access to all of that. So we've gone through 3 levels. We've gone through 3 levels like this. I'm going to just do a little recap of them first. We started off with almost all percussive playing. And as I said, if for the beginner players, if you can just play bass, strum at the beginning, that's really cool. Okay, but ultimately this first way of thinking was to get that bass, strum, and then the down, up, slap, up, down, up, slap, up motion. Now for the more advanced players already, we had the string slap when we flicked our fingers out there so that we have a nice consistent snare drum on 2 and 4. And we change chords to the G sus2. Then we stepped it up a gear and started bringing in the chords a little bit by simply doing the same thing in our right hand or our picking hand, but then squeezing to let the chord ring out. Lovely. Then we took it one step further, added in a little bit of melody. A nice little scale for you guys to play with. Cool. So hopefully there has been something for everyone there. Slightly more advanced in some ways, I think, than some sessions, but I think that's good. It's good to push us to a place. It was really nice if in some sessions there's always something maybe that you can't quite play straight away, but then equally always something that you can play straight away as well. And even here in this example, if you walk away with that chord sequence, that's kind of nice to lose yourself in anyway. Okay, but ultimately everything still just comes down to down and up, slap, up, down, up, slap, up, down, up, slap, up, down, up, slap, up. So that's the main lesson from today, I think. Fantastic. All right, well, just for the last few minutes, unless anyone's got any questions, and if they come later, that's fine, you can ask. Let's just play it round in however way you want to, and you can just jam along or play however you like, really. Here we go then. 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. There we go. Voila. That's a fantastic little session there. Thank you so much for playing along as well.